Lord God, thank you for giving us this time together, and bless us as we go about studying your word. In the name of Christ we pray, amen.
Amen.
All right, we've been looking at the appearance.
I better not be on the screen on Sunday.
Oh, that would be funny. That would be funny.
Don't give him any ideas.
Funny. As soon as you use that word, my ears perk out. Because I will do virtually anything for a life.
That's what.
All right. We're talking about the time after. Somehow I've got to work John's challenge in anyway.
Oh, okay.
For Sunday.
Well, you can use that here too.
Yeah, I can use this. Maybe I bring them together. We are looking at the appearances of Jesus after the resurrection. We looked at the Gospel of Mark, and what kind of appearances do we have made by Jesus in Mark?
Was that the walking?
Okay. And that makes sense. I mean, it is kind of confusing.
I know what you look to it to some people, to other people.
Well, Mark has two endings that were added.
Mark has two
endings. So we got these two endings that are added later. What about in Matthew? We'll go back to Matthew a little bit in a minute. What happens in Matthew? So we got Mark just sort of ends, made people uncomfortable, tacked on two different endings. What about Matthew? Was
that the appearance with the two guys?
Okay, no.
I'm trying to get myself.
No, that's going to be in Luke. The two guys are going to show up in Luke. What about what happens in Matthew?
Well, in one of them, the women run away, and another one they run and tell them.
Okay, that's it. Matthew, they run and tell. Same, because when you look at Matthew and you look at Mark, Matthew and Mark are the closest of the four Gospels, because about like 95% of Mark is in the Gospel of Matthew, and then other stuff. Because Matthew's 28 chapters, Mark is just barely a little bit over 15.
The same age.
What's that?
About the same age.
Well, Mark was probably earlier. And Matthew used Mark and augmented it with material of his own. And Matthew organizes his gospel
like a stage.
He groups things together, like all the teachings he puts together,
like
and the parables he puts together.
Is it like a stage? Like he's staging it?
Well, it is. It's like if you've got they're in camp and they've got a schedule at camp, right? And so you know what they're doing, at the different points in camp. But if you ask Clyde, they're going swimming at 1 o'clock, and they're going to swim until 2 o'clock. Okay, you say, well, what happened as you were swimming? And Clyde said, let me tell you what happened. When we were swimming, we saw this snake, and we tried to catch the snake. And then what he's doing is he's taking that.
You'll never
You
get
ask
that.
Elizabeth, she says we didn't do anything but swim. Taking that timeline and adding new information, and that's kind of what Matthew does. He takes Mark's timeline and adds stuff to it, stuff that he knows that isn't in Mark. He also adds some stuff that he shares with Luke.
But he's not making it up.
No, he's adding material. Like I
what
told you
he's
before,
listening to.
one of the things you can do, envision with these evangelists, I think, the gospel writers, is they're sitting at a desk, and the desk is covered with little bits of paper. And on those little pieces of paper, you've got stories about Jesus. A whole bunch of stories about Jesus. And what they're doing is they're taking these stories that are just piled up there, and they're organizing it in a way that conveys the truth they believe about Jesus.
Try to break it down.
Yes, exactly. And they do it in different ways. Like Matthew will put things together. So we got a Sermon on the Mount all together. 3 chapters, boom, the teaching of Jesus. Well, Luke has all of the stuff there. All the stuff that Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, Luke also has on the little pieces of paper. Only Luke chooses, instead of putting it all together, what he does is he kind of scatters it through his gospel, because he's organizing it in a different way. It doesn't mean one's right and the other one's wrong. It's just that choosing to organize the material in a way that best conveys what they want to say. With Matthew and Mark are very close. And so a lot of the stories in Mark, you also see in Matthew almost the same. Like in Matthew and Mark, you've got Jesus' last word, my God, why have you forsaken me? Those are also his last words in Matthew. You know, in Mark, you've got the centurion at the cross saying, truly he is the Son of God. You got the centurion at the cross saying, truly he is the Son of God. You don't have that in Luke. You don't have that in John. You know, so Mark and Matthew are very similar. Now, they see Jesus in different ways, you know, but the story itself is very, very similar. And Matthew uses Mark's structure. Okay, so we've got but Matthew has the appearance on the mountain in Galilee. You know, going disciple all nations. Okay, so we've got that. We talked about Luke. We talked about 2 appearances in Luke. And what are the 2 things in Luke? So we got Mark, just ends. We got Matthew, commission on the mountain. I'll be with you always. What do we have going on in Luke?
We didn't use
Oh my goodness! What do we got? What do we got going on in Luke? Bar mitzvah? Only if you're lucky. You got to bring a gift.
Skip?
Yeah, the band will be nice. In Luke, we remember we got Emmaus Road, and then we got him appearing and eating fish, and then ascending. You know, so Luke, and one season, if Matthew is, this is what I want you to do and I'm going to be with you always. We got Luke saying, and he says it over and over again, remember what he taught. Remember what I taught. Remember what I taught. So we got that going on in Luke. Last week we talked about John, and we said 2 appearances in John 20. What was going on in John 20? Thomas. Okay, remember, Jesus shows up. They're afraid of the Jews. Behind locked doors. Breathes on them, gives them the Spirit. Kind of gives them a little commission. Thomas isn't there. Thomas says what? Show me. You know, show me. He's from Missouri. You got to show me. You know, I need to feel the scars. I need to put my hand in the sun. And then I'll believe. Jesus shows up again, and Thomas makes this confession of faith. But then Jesus says something that, again, you know, kind of shoots past the disciples right to the later church, right? Because he says, blessed are you, did you believe because you've seen me? Blessed are those who believe without having seen, which is directed at Christians 50 years later, right? Not directed at the disciples, directed at Christians 50 years later who haven't seen it, couldn't have seen it, because Jesus was.
Is it true that Jesus ate in front of them? So, at least I'm reading that Bible, but he ate in front of them so that he would show he was still
I think that was, in Luke, I think that is something really important that Luke wants to establish.
Yeah.
That Jesus was real. Now, and we've talked about it before, the reason that's such a big deal is the Jews believed your future life had to be. The Jews believed that you had to be I had to be resurrected in order to have an afterlife. Okay? So the Jews believed that if you didn't have a resurrected life, you would have no life after death. So that's why a physical resurrection was a huge deal.
Yeah.
For particularly Luke. And remember, Luke is writing to a very sophisticated audience, you know, that knows about Judaism. And therefore, so this would have been particularly important for them.
So he's writing a universal Bible.
In a sense, but he's using a Hebrew theology.
Okay.
He's not using Greek philosophy, he's using Hebrew theology. And that's a big deal.
You know, when someone dies in the Jewish faith, they bury that night or the next day, but they sit Shiva on orange crates in their living room for a week. Did you know that?
I didn't know that, but I know the Jews It's a big deal how long you have to wait before you bury it, because the Jews believe that the spirit remains around the person for a certain amount of time.
Right.
3 days becomes the amount of time you have to wait
So they sit there
and wait.
and they don't even eat.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
God bless them.
Yeah, a lot of weight
I
loss.
sat one.
No matzah for 3
I sat
days.
one for a girlfriend of mine, her grandmother died, and she said, come sit shiva with us. Okay, I didn't know what it was. The orange crate, not comfortable.
I don't believe it.
Are they talking? Are they just sitting there with
They
crying?
sit. Oh, some of the older people cry. The younger kids are running around.
Okay, so we got all of that going on. We're going to look at the story, and remember how when we looked at chapter 20, how chapter 20 ends in John? Do you remember how chapter 20 ends?
Lord and God.
Yeah, it sounds like the end because he says, this is the end.
Right.
You know, I've written this so that you might believe. And then all of a sudden we've got 21. And we've seen that happen in John before, that it seems like we got stories that are connected, but aren't connected as well as we'd expect. They seem to be kind of independent. You know, we talked about Mary Magdalene in the garden. You know, she goes, tells the disciples, and then they go and see, and then all of a sudden, she's back at the garden again.
Yeah.
You know, so we end up with something like that. Okay, so we've got the second story in the Gospel of John, John 21. Okay, so if you've got it, I've got the sheets that I've done. We're going to be looking at 3 little passages in chapter 21. All right, as we look at the beginning of chapter 21, the top part, what is happening in 21, 1 through 14? What's happening in this whole little section?
The phone's ringing.
Okay, we got disciples, right? And what are the disciples doing? What is the theme of this?
They're going fishing.
They're going fishing, right? They're going fishing. Now, the disciples going fishing, and in general, what happens when they go fishing? They didn't catch anything. Jesus shows up, casts the nets on the other side, catch fish, bang. Now, have we, as we have read the Gospels, all 4, have we seen this story before? Where the disciples are fishing, cast your nets on the other side, and catch fish.
In the book.
In the book.
Yeah.
Have we seen that story before?
Yeah, Jesus did it.
Well, where did Jesus do it?
In the water.
Well, he did it in the water. What are we talking about? Where do we see that story?
Isn't that when he was gathering up his disciples?
Yes! You're 100% right. If you look at the
Because he
Gospel
was a
of Luke,
fisherman.
chapter 5, it's when Jesus is calling Peter and Andrew. You know, when he calls them, it's the same story, right?
Yeah.
You know, part of the calling. Now, in fact, it is so similar, it seems almost
Deja vu.
a deja vu, which makes it identical. Now, since we've got this story that sounds almost identical in Luke chapter 5, how might we interpret? But that's right at the beginning of his ministry, right? Because that's when he's calling the disciples, right? This is happening when?
After.
At the very end, right?
Yeah.
How might we interpret that? Or how might we view those stories?
When it's repeated, it must be important.
Well, okay, it must be important. What else might we say?
He's seen now, can't do it.
What else might we say? If we've got the same stories in 2 Gospels, but they're in different places.
Maybe trust Jesus to provide.
Okay, maybe we're talking about one story. In other words, maybe this didn't happen twice.
Yeah.
The exact same thing. Because if it had happened twice, in this story, we'd have expected them to say what? Gee, this happened
Yeah.
a year ago. This same thing happened. It seems to be the same story used in different ways. So maybe it's one story, being used in a
With multiple
different
people.
way in the Gospel of John than it was in the Gospel of
With
Luke.
multiple.
Emphasizes.
Well, the first time, they didn't know him as Jesus.
Right.
This time they don't know him either.
Right, right.
So they would not necessarily think that that's the two same stories. Because
If-
it's two different.
Maybe there was
If
multiple
you were a
at the
disciple,
same time.
and twice someone said, put your net, you haven't caught anything, put your net over on the other side and you get a whole bunch of fish. You think that happens often
Yeah, people.
as a fish? I'm not thinking that happens often. Well, you may be right. This may have happened 2 times. I think it's the same story. That the two, on that little piece of paper, that the two writers are using in different places.
Well, because the first one, they're talking about a couple people. The second one, they're talking about multiple. Maybe they didn't
Well,
want
and
everybody
in
to-
both, Hugh's right. In both of them, they don't know Jesus.
and because you said
Which
before
means
that
they don't know
people-
Jesus after the resurrection, which is similar to what happened to Mary Magdalene. But maybe this is the same story that the two evangelists are using in slightly different.
Well, because you said they had to save on paper. Maybe this one had more paper room.
Well, yeah, maybe John is using that story that's on that little slip of paper in a different place.
Yeah.
In a different place. Anyway, so maybe not, maybe it happened twice. Could be, I don't know. But you find that interesting. That's when you study scripture, you start looking at it and you say, oh, that's kind of interesting. That they're so close. One evangelist uses it here and one evangelist uses it there. Okay, so Jesus is, now where does all this happen?
On the shore.
On the shore. Shore of what?
Galilee.
Okay, it's on the shore of the Sea of Galilee,
Yeah.
right? Okay. Has anything else happened occurred near the Sea of Galilee? In the Gospel of John?
They swim naked.
Anything else happened near the shore of Galilee? Sea of Galilee? No, wasn't walking on water. Although it is, but that's not in John. There's nothing in John about Jesus walking on water.
Well, apparently
Okay.
they knew who Christ was because it said it is the Lord, and they jumped up.
Okay. In John, we got the feeding of the 5,000
Yeah.
by the Sea of Galilee. Feeding of the 5,000. We want to file that away because maybe there are going to be parallels between the story that is going to be given here and the feeding of the 5,000. Maybe one story will help us understand the other one. And when you look at it, both of them are going to involve fish, right? Having a meal involving fish. Okay. So what else happened in Galilee in the Gospel? Because Galilee isn't as important in John as it is in the
Was
other
it the
Gospels.
wedding?
Yes! The wedding in Cana of Galilee.
Yeah.
We've got a wedding story. And in that wedding story, what happens? So we got the feeding of the 5,000. Well,
They ran out of wine, so then Mary said to him, go make wine. He said, my time hasn't come yet.
right. But he does it anyway.
Yeah.
And what happens as a result of him doing that?
What's what?
What happens as a result of him
They
making
love the wine better.
They like it. And how does that work into the story?
It's a miracle.
Okay, it's the first miracle, the wedding at Cana of Galilee. It's a miracle because
He
what's
provided
occurred?
for them.
What's that?
He provided for them.
Okay, good. He provided for them, and they recognized that he was
The Lord.
providing for them, right? He recognized that he was the Lord. What happens in the feeding of the 5,000?
They didn't think they had enough fish, and they had more than enough.
Okay. Whoa. Wait a minute. The wedding at Cana in Galilee, they didn't have enough wine. Take the water to Jesus, creates more wine, so they have more than enough. Feeding of the 5,000, they don't have enough food.
And there's
They bring the food that they have to Jesus, and they end up with
An overflow.
more than enough.
take-home food.
So that-
Those stories sound
No, it's just saying that Jesus will provide, God will provide.
Yeah, those stories sound very similar, like they have the same
Miracle.
point. Yeah, both miracles seem to have the same point. The guy Jesus is going to provide. Maybe that may be in here. We don't know yet. We just started. So that may be something we want to file away, because in John, those things happen in Galilee.
Yes.
Okay, so we just started the story, and we're kind of filing this away. Abundance, having more than you need, seems to be a theme in Galilean miracles. Okay.
Everything started in Galilee.
Okay, everything starts in Galilee, sure. Now, who is present?
Who's the president?
Who is present? Yeah. Who is present? Who is present?
We're like,
The disciples and God.
Who is present?
Over here, who's the president?
The disciples and Jesus.
Okay, we got some disciples, but the disciples are named, don't they?
Yeah.
Okay, we got Simon Peter,
I'm trying to pronounce it.
we got Thomas, and we just dealt with Thomas, right? And we got who else? Okay, we got
Sons.
Peter, and we got the sons of Zebedee, but we also have
Nathanael.
who else is named?
Bless you.
Nathanael of Cana.
Nathanael of
Cana.
Cana in Galilee, which draws us immediately to what?
The wedding.
The wedding, because John doesn't need to include that, but he does. And it kind of draws our attention to what happened earlier in the same gospel at Cana in Galilee.
We should never forget that.
That's right. Well, at least this may be John telling us, guys, as you read this story, the miracle at Cana may be important, may help you understand
And all
what's
the
going on
witnesses.
here. Just like the feeding of the 5,000.
And all the witnesses.
Yes, and what about Nathanael? When did Nathanael show up in the Gospel of John? What is Nathanael's situation in John?
I don't know.
Well, it's a story unique to John, because Philip comes and tells Nathanael that he has found Jesus. He has found the Messiah.
Yeah.
And Nathanael says, can anything good come from Nazareth?
Where is he?
It's not here. This is in chapter 1. This is where Nathanael shows up. Only other place that Nathanael is mentioned is this story. And when Nathanael comes and sees Jesus, Jesus says, truly, an Israelite, pure of heart. Nathanael says, how did you know that? I've never met you. And Jesus says, I saw you when you were talking over there. And Nathanael says, whoa, that's pretty good. You must be Son of God. You must be Son of God. That's what Nathanael says. And Jesus says, are you calling me Son of God because I saw you under a fig tree? You're going to see greater things than that. And here's Nathanael mentioned the second time in the whole gospel. He's mentioned by name here. Maybe an indication that he's about to see what?
Something important.
Something important, something greater, right? Okay. So all of this we've got by just looking at the location and the names.
Yeah.
That we've got an indication of what's going to come. We're expecting some sign that Jesus is giving more than expected.
Yeah.
Also giving this great sign. Okay. Sign. Yeah, this great miracle coming. Okay. Now, now we're in the story. So we're right at the beginning of the story. What does Peter say? What does Peter say to you?
He's going fishing.
I am going
Fishing.
fishing. Now, going fishing, this is kind of a loaded term, because he's going fishing. With what have fish been associated? People, right? So, we kind of got in the back of our mind, maybe more is going on here than meets the eye. Because remember, Jesus talked about fishing for people, and there's a similar, this comparison between fish and people. Peter going fishing may or may not be a loaded term, okay? And so he says, I'm going fishing, and what do the other disciples say?
They was gonna go.
Okay, we're gonna go too, right? And what do?
Caught nothing.
They go out in the boat and they catch
Nothing.
nothing. They catch none.
On the wrong side.
Why did they make it?
Well, why wouldn't they have clothes on?
I have no idea.
Well, that's the only thing they have. Maybe that's, they didn't want to get it wet.
You know, the temperature is high.
We don't know the
they're
temperature
hot, they're
situation.
So you get naked and fish.
Well, maybe they have to jump in the water and get some,
Yeah,
try to look
maybe, I
for
don't
it.
know.
Well, if they get the water to hold.
They didn't have real fishing poles.
Yeah, but they should get fishing with nets, right? Okay, so they catch nothing. Now, if we're talking about setting up for a miracle, okay, we kind of set up for this miracle. A miracle occurred. I mean, when you hear that they catch nothing, you know, we kind of got something maybe going to happen. If we take it as an image for going out and witnessing, you know, maybe this is, you know, they're by themselves, they've made the decision to do it alone, they're catching no result. Okay, who appears at daybreak?
Jesus.
Jesus. Now, why would daybreak be significant? Why
There's
would
always
daybreak be
daybreak.
significant?
It's easier in the day. It's early in the morning. He's probably out and about.
Okay, it's early in the morning. Why might daybreak carry and sort of an added weight, a symbolic weight?
Beginning of the day,
Beginning of the day. One of the images John uses a lot is the contrast between light and dark.
Yeah.
Light and dark. When does Nicodemus, who doesn't understand, come to visit Jesus?
At night.
It comes at night. When do the women come to the tomb?
Early in the morning.
Right? When does Jesus appear at the beach?
Early in the morning.
Early morning. When are the guys fishing?
Early.
At night.
At
Oh,
night.
night, okay.
At night and catching nothing. So now Jesus, early morning, when it's getting to be light, not a big deal, but I don't think this is an accident that John is using it. Jesus is standing on the beach. Now, how do the disciples respond when Jesus is standing
They
on
didn't
the
even
beach?
know it was him.
They didn't know it was him. Now, is this the first time this sort of thing has happened?
No.
Heck no. When did it happen before?
More than once.
Happened more than once. When did it happen more than once?
When he was walking down the
Okay,
road.
well, the road to Emmaus, that's in Luke. But you're right. We don't even have to leave John to do it. Mary Magdalene, remember in the garden? You know, thought he was a gardener, you know, when Jesus appeared? Okay, until he spoke her name. Then she
Recognized
knew.
him.
Okay, so they don't recognize him. This is not new in John. You call it kind of a motif. This is what John has done before. What does Jesus say?
Children
You have
have
no
any
fish.
fish.
Now, this tells us, you know, again, not a huge deal, but it tells us a little bit about Jesus. Jesus knows that they haven't caught anything, right? Okay. So Jesus knows, and their response is,
Nope.
nope, we haven't.
Is there some significance in him calling them children?
Absolutely. What significance might there be in him calling them children?
Because he's been saying
Identify
that.
himself.
Okay,
Said
identify. You know, again, calling by name. No, we haven't caught anything. And then what does he tell them?
Cast a net with the
Cast your net on the other side, and you will catch
Your fish.
some,
But
right?
what made that happen?
Well, what
Can you
and what ends up happening?
They catch a lot of fish.
They do, and they catch a whole bunch of fish. Now, you know, if we decide to take this literally,
Yeah.
boy, that's a miracle, right? But let's interpret it. What is John trying to say to us by writing this miracle? This isn't just, oh boy, that's really cool. This is nice to know
Because
information.
he knows.
You know, he knows the good fishing grounds. You know, what is John trying to tell us?
We have something to learn from Jesus.
Okay, good.
To listen.
They couldn't catch anything all night. But when Jesus gave them a command and they responded,
They listened to him.
it worked.
And the fish jumped in the boat.
And if that's right, and if we take this just at fish, with the fish, we have seen what? A miracle, right? If we take this fishing idea and say it is a metaphor and image for something else, then when you listen to Jesus,
You trust him.
when you trust Jesus
Trust him.
instead of yourself,
Trust and listen.
all of a sudden things change.
Plentiful.
All of a sudden things change. So we're taking it on what? We're taking it on two levels, right? We're not saying one level is right, the other level is wrong. This is a story that you can take on two levels. We've got a miracle working here, but we've also got something that symbolically may represent something else.
I think it's more trust.
Are there any,
Yeah, well, I mean, you're going
As
on both sides.
directions.
are there any writers today that write as well as these men?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, if you look at what you don't even need to be great, really good writer is doing, they're doing the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
They're working all kinds of images in their work. They're working, they're using language. A lot of times we don't get it,
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean that it isn't there. Just like here, we're studying it.
Yeah.
Therefore we're picking it up. If you take their work and study it, you pick it up. You can
Yeah.
pick it up.
Okay.
So that's what we got. We got a miracle that certainly involving trust. They get a big bunch of fish, right? Okay. Now it's interesting. Got a big bunch of fish. Geez, we saw that in Galilee before, right? When did we see it in Galilee? We saw it in the wedding.
Wedding.
Whole bunch of wine. We saw it at fed the 5,000, a whole bunch of fish and bread. All of a sudden, we've got something that is sort of in line with these other miracles that are occurring. This abundance.
A lot of it deals with fish too.
What's that?
I said a lot of it
Yeah,
deals with fish,
dealing with fish, right?
It's either fish or bread.
Yes, that's right. And when we're talking about fish and bread, taking the fish and the bread and breaking it again, we kind of got this communion thing going, right?
Sharing.
Yes. Art, you look like you're ready to add something.
I am.
I can tell.
This thing about the fish thing is that's their main source of food.
Sure.
So what he's doing is treating them.
In a sense, sure.
He's not doing it to brag about
No.
himself.
We don't get that. We don't get that.
No.
The sharing.
But he is making them satisfied.
He is giving them more than they even need.
Yeah.
Yes, he's giving them more than
And
they
that
need.
shows you what heaven's like.
Well, I think it shows what earth is like. Because if this is an image of going out and being fishers of people, it's when we trust in Jesus that the nets become full. It's when we trust in ourselves working at night, we ain't gonna get it. And the contrast is really strong. From getting nothing to getting so much that the nets rip, but or should rip, but of course don't rip.
But was that wasted then?
Well, we don't even, I don't even think John cares about it. I don't think that's his win at all. I don't care about it because I care about what the writer cares about. If at the end he said, unfortunately all these fish were wasted, then I would have to say, well, if the writer did care about that. But if I add that to it, then I'm adding something to the story.
Yes.
That I probably shouldn't do. If the writer wanted me to believe that or see that, he'd have told me.
Yes.
Just like a fellow you talked
I'm
about
with
today.
you on that.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. If Jesus, I was telling Chris earlier today, had a little conversation, a biblical conversation with the guy, and it was about Matthew 25, chapter 25. And in Matthew 25, which is a real pivotal chapter in the Gospel of Matthew, it comes right before the Passion begins. Because at the beginning of 26, we've got the entry into Jerusalem.
Yes.
So it's a big deal. The 25th chapter. No, I'm wrong. It's the Lord's Supper in chapter 26. Anyway, it's the beginning of the Passion. Jesus says, when the Son of Man returns with all his angels, He will gather the nations. Now, that's really powerful because the word used there is ethnos. It's the word nation.
That's good.
He doesn't say, gather all the people. Doesn't say people, that's laos. It says all the nations, ethnos, and divide them as a shepherd divides sheep from goats. Well, who are the them? Who would you assume, given what I just said to you, the pronoun them refers to?
The apostles.
Nations.
Nations.
Oh.
Nations. He's going to divide the nations, and he will separate them like a shepherd separates sheep from goats. So he's talking about nations. He's not talking about individuals. He's talking about nations. Well, that's what I was saying. That's what I was saying to him. That this is, if we want to know how Jesus is going to judge nations, we look here, because this is what he says. He will divide the nations. What's the basis? I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. That's the basis. He said, no. The them refers to individuals. Well, maybe, could, but which is more likely? That Jesus has shifted the image from nation, between nation and the pronoun, he shifted to individuals from nations. Or that when he says nations, the plural, third person plural, refers to nations. Because if he had wanted to indicate a shift, he would have said it. He would have said, when he separates the nations, and I will say to the people, then he made the shift. But if he doesn't indicate it, we're on slippery ground if we say, but he really meant it. Well, how do I know he meant it? He doesn't say it. So he meant it because that's the way I want to read it. That's the way I want to read it. Yeah, that's the way I'm interpreting it, even though grammatically it makes less sense, but that's what I really wanted to say.
Nations.
Maybe, but unlikely, less likely. And that's what's going on here. That Jesus, John is going to give us the information we need to understand this story. He's giving us the information we need.
And the power of God.
Absolutely. Okay, so they get all this fish. Who responds? And again, this is kind of cool. Who responds first?
Peter.
The disciple whom Jesus loved.
Never did find that out.
Never find out who it is yet. We don't know who it is. For sure. Could be John, could be somebody else. Never said, oh, by the way, John is the one I like best. Now, it doesn't say that in there. Again, if he wanted us to know, he'd have told us.
He doesn't want to.
He said, but we've seen this before, right?
Yeah.
When did we see it before? Remember when we saw this before? With the disciple whom Jesus loved?
Yeah, right.
When did we see it before? What's that? We saw it at the Last Supper, right? And the one that Jesus loved was beside him, rested his head on him.
Yeah.
When else did we see it? Crucifixion, right? What happened with the crucifixion?
They all hid. They didn't know.
Spoke to him, said, take care of him.
That's right. Jesus is making living arrangements for his mother. When else did we see it?
At the tomb.
At the tomb. What happens at the tomb? Peter and this disciple run. And who gets there first?
Mary.
The women.
No,
The disciple he loved got there first. Right?
Who was that?
Well, that's the term used. Here, for him. That's the way he's identified. He's not given a proper name. All right? He again is first, right? Because he's the first one that says what? Okay. First one that says it is the Lord. He's the first one that sees that. Okay? And again, similar, this is a sign that Jesus is identified by this miracle, right? And who responds?
Peter.
Simon Peter. And what does Simon Peter do?
He got dressed.
He put on some clothes and he jumped in the water and started to swim. And you know, it's kind of interesting because we've got the disciple whom Jesus loved and Simon Peter, right? The two of them. We had the two of them at the tomb, right?
Right.
The one who, the disciple whom Jesus loved, got to the tomb first. When Simon got there, he did what? You remember what he did? He did something the disciple Jesus loved didn't do. He went in. Same thing here, right? The disciple whom he loves is the first one to say, that's the Lord. Right? Peter is the one that acted. Went into the tomb, jumps in the water to swim to the shore. In the resurrection story, it says the disciple whom Jesus loved was also the first one to believe. Was the first one to believe. Okay, of the two, you know, he believed first. Okay, same sort of thing going here. So it's consistent with what John has given us in chapter 20. Okay. Now, what do the others do?
They go to the boat and drag the fish in.
Okay, they end up coming to the shore in the boat, dragging the fish, because they weren't far from land, right?
The fish, the
Now-
nets were full.
The nets were full. Okay, when they'd gone on shore, they saw what? What did they see?
Charcoal fire.
Okay, there a charcoal fire, yes,
Fish.
with fish on it, and
Those guys.
And bread. It even has
How did
bread.
they get that fish, or those fish, and we couldn't even catch them?
therefore, maybe something is going on here that's pretty important.
Well, they
You
had
know?
bread too.
What image do we have here? He's got fish and bread. When did we see fish and bread before?
When he was,
Feeding of the 5,000 that also happened on the shore of Galilee, right? So here we've got these images that are running. This image of the wedding where there's an abundance of wine that demonstrates Jesus' compassion, love, and power. Here we've got fish and bread on the shore, which is the same thing Jesus used when he fed the 5,000 where? On the shore of Galilee. Okay, so we've got these stories that are parallel going on here.
Mary had more to do with that, though.
What's that?
She forced him.
Well, Mary and the wedding of Cana. Yeah. Now, what's interesting, I think, is that, and we're kind of being set up for what's coming later with Peter. You know, Peter jumps in to swim to shore, right?
With clothes on.
With his clothes on, yeah.
Yeah. He dresses to go to shore.
Himself in his raft before he jumps in the water.
Yeah.
Actually, that makes sense.
Well, what doesn't make sense? What really doesn't make sense? Why is Peter jumping in the water to swim to shore?
Wants to be the first to get.
He wants to be the first one to get there, right? That's why you do it, because he is impulsive. You know, he sees the disciple whom Jesus loved said, there's the Lord. Peter gets so excited, he puts on, you know, something, jumps in the water to swim. But we find out what?
He can't swim.
That the boat beats him to shore.
Oh.
The
Wasn't
boat
fast
beats
enough.
him to shore. So Peter's swimming.
Well, that's what the clothes are dragging him down.
Peter swimming is actually
Useless.
useless. It's impulsive, but accomplishes nothing. In fact, puts him behind the others.
Yeah.
Puts him behind the others. Particularly puts him behind the disciple whom Jesus loved.
Yeah.
But
You
he
know.
is one.
But again, you know, Peter is doing this. This is not, and we're going to see this later in the story, this is not glorifying Peter to the later church. The church reads this and says, well, why, you know, he's getting dressed and swim, and he jumps in the water to swim so he can come in
First.
last.
No.
You know, if he had stayed in the boat,
he would have got there.
he'd have gotten there faster than jumping in and trying to swim to shore. Yeah, I think this is John.
These aren't college graduates.
Can't
Yeah, well, I think this is John reminding us that Peter is not
He's
maybe
foolish.
the sharpest knife in the drawer,
I get it.
which means he may be writing to a community
Yes.
that doesn't view Peter. You know, maybe within Christianity, they're the ones who love Peter and the ones who aren't as influenced and maybe John's community isn't as intense. Okay, maybe.
Good.
Maybe.
Good.
You know, that's
Good today.
You know, maybe. Don't know, but that's a possible, you know, kind of makes you think a little bit. Okay. Wouldn't have seen this sort of thing in Luke because Peter tends to be the hero in Luke. Okay. Now, what does, they get to shore, what does Jesus ask?
Prayer.
Doesn't ask for prayer.
He asked for some of the fish.
He asked for some of the fish, right? And now what does Peter do?
He gets on board.
Hauled
and he
the
hauls
net
the
ashore.
Now he gets on board the boat and he does what?
Hauls
Okay,
the-
hauls the net ashore. Now, when we see hauls the net ashore, what is he doing? When he's hauling the net ashore, what is he doing?
He's just dragging it in.
He's dragging it in, right? Because that's what the word haul means. When you haul something on shore, you're dragging it on shore, right? But if you look at the Greek word, that Greek word is used in two different places in John. In John chapter 6, verse 44, this is what John writes. No one can come to me unless drawn by the Father, hauled by the Father who sent me. And I will raise the person up in the last day. Same word. Translated here, haul. Translated earlier, draw. Then in John 12:32, John writes, and this is Jesus speaking, and I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself. Same Greek word. Same
And what is the
Greek
word? What is the Greek word?
I don't know. I'd have to check.
Oh, you don't?
I don't know what offhand. Not Greek word. It's not one that's used very often.
Okay.
So, but it's the same Greek word. Now, what might John then, if this is the way he's used the word before, hauling fish to shore, what might be this double meaning? We certainly have a miracle, right? But maybe we've got, maybe as people, just like, the Father's going to draw people, and unless he draws them, maybe this is symbolically a sign of what?
Another community.
People being drawn to
Members.
God, drawn to Jesus, being drawn to Jesus.
Draw his crowd in so he could talk to them.
Yeah, same word here. Same word here. And it's all in the net, right?
Yeah.
And it was full of 153 of them.
Who counted that?
Don't know. I don't know what the number means, but I bet it means something.
Yeah.
I bet it meant something to John.
People.
Because he wouldn't have mentioned it if it hadn't meant something to him.
Right,
That's right. But there's a lot of fish, right? But the net
Was not even torn.
torn. Now, if we're looking at, again, this is a miracle certainly, but maybe it's saying miracle on this level, but it's also saying something on this level. And we'd say that hauling fish can be compared to drawing people.
To church.
Jesus is hauling fish on shore. God is drawing people to himself. The net isn't torn. What might that represent?
Well,
That all these fish in the net, but the net is still secure.
well, there was another story that combined
Well,
with
because
it when he
they're
had
always-
invited everybody, didn't matter who they were.
Okay, right. And we've seen that before
Yeah.
in other parables, right? Where there's a lot of fish in the net and the angels separate the good ones from the bad ones.
And they didn't like the idea.
That's right. The fact that the net isn't
Parties or
torn
whatever.
may be saying what?
It's a good name.
Fish came willingly.
Well, fish came well. Okay, there was a fish involved in it. Maybe they weren't putting pressure on the net.
This is a good.
Didn't lose any. Imagine, didn't lose any. Man, y'all are coming with good stuff. Because what I was saying, I think you're right. I was thinking too that that the net. Don't worry. Don't worry about bringing in a lot of people into your community.
Yeah.
As Christians, don't worry about all these people coming into your community. I'll guarantee you, you're not gonna fall apart if you bring different kind of people into your
Remember
community.
we studied
The net is secure.
We studied that
Right.
early on.
Everybody's
We were the other
included.
religions and how they were bringing people in and some didn't want to go.
Right.
Remember?
Yes, indeed. So here Jesus is, maybe John is telling, again, the church later, that Jesus is drawing people to himself.
Yeah.
People aren't going to get lost. They aren't going to fall away. They're going to be involved willingly in it. Therefore, it's not putting the pressure on the net you may fear. And, no matter how many you bring in, guess what?
You're accepted.
The net is going to be fine. Okay?
You'll always be protected.
Always be protected. It is not going to be torn. Okay? Not going to be torn. What does Jesus say in verse 12?
Come and have breakfast.
Come and have breakfast. How did the disciples react?
Was he a good cook?
Who are you?
Okay, well, they said, what does it say?
It says none of
About
them
it.
dared to
None
ask.
of them would say,
No.
who are you? Because what?
They knew
They
it was
knew
the Lord.
what?
They knew it was the Lord. Now, same sort of thing happened. Has happened before. When Mary heard her name, recognized. When Jesus calls them children, recognize. The shepherd, the sheep know the shepherd's voice. By gum, they know his voice. And what does Jesus do?
Break bread.
Gosh almighty. He took the bread and gave it to them. That sure sounds like
Communion.
communion, another communion image. So within this scene, he's sharing this image of himself, this symbol.
Do you think that's why there's such an importance on the wine and on the bread in the churches?
Oh, absolutely.
Because of this.
Absolutely. But I'll tell you, I don't believe John is writing, phrasing it in this way to start something new. I think he's doing this just like the other people do it, just like Paul does it. This is something they're celebrating. This is something that the early church is doing. They're doing something with bread.
Yeah.
I think in John's community, it's something with bread and fish. Because this is the second time he's used bread and fish in sort of a sacramental image. I think John's church, we don't do it now, but I think John's church is doing it. I think what he does here by including it is the people in John's church look at this and say, what?
It's a banquet.
Well, it's a banquet and we do this because Jesus did it. This is directly grounded in what Jesus did. Road to Emmaus. When he broke the bread.
Yes.
And they recognized him. Well, gee, we break the bread every Sunday. Hey, what about that? You break it, and it's centered on Jesus. On the Emmaus Road, they broke it and recognized him. In other words, he's reinforcing a practice that they're already following.
As much as I've read this, I've never thought of it that deep.
I think this is exactly what John is doing.
Supposed to.
And it makes complete sense.
Are you?
Okay, so we've got this is the third appearance he makes, right? He made the appearance to him behind locked doors. He made the appearance to him with Thomas, and now he's making an appearance to him on the beach.
Yeah.
And boy, this story is sort of semi-over because Jesus moves on from there, right? Or John moves, as he describes it. And this is something he offers that is only in John. After they finish breakfast, what does Jesus start doing?
In the dishes.
Nope.
He asked him
He leaves them for the man. Okay. He starts doing what?
Question.
Yeah. In particular, who?
Simon.
Simon. He talks to Simon Peter. Okay. And what does Jesus say to Simon Peter? Now he says about the same thing. He asks the same question. Seems to at 3 times, right?
Yeah.
Little different.
Little different. Thank you. If you look at most English versions, it's going to be Jesus says, "Do you love me?" Simon Peter says,
You know that I love
"Yes." Jesus says the first time,
Feed my lambs.
"Feed my lambs." Jesus says, "Simon, do you love me?" Jesus says, or Simon says, "Yes." He says,
Tend my sheep.
"Tend my sheep." He says, "Do you love me?" in most English translations. And Simon says, gets kind of ticked off. Yeah, and says, why are you asking me? You should know this. You know I love you. And Jesus says what?
Feed my sheep.
Okay, feed my sheep. Okay?
Feed
So,
my sheep?
feed my sheep. Now, kind of interesting going on here, right? Because if you look at the English, most English translations, it's love, 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 love. But remember, I did it in a sermon not long ago. In this passage, in Greek, there are two words that are translated love, that are translated same. The two words are translated. And in English, they both mean love. They both mean love.
What are they?
Okay, we got two words. Now remember, in this, do you love me? All of these, the word for love here is being used as a verb. It's not being used as a name. Right? Okay.
Are you in love with me? That would be,
okay, good. You got two different words. One is a Greek word, phileo.
yeah.
And phileo, man, we've got a city in our country that uses phileo. Yeah, Philadelphia. Adelphos in Greek means
City?
polos means city. Whenever you see polos, like Minneapolis,
Yeah.
Indianapolis, polis is city in Greek.
Okay.
Adelphos isn't city. Adelphos means
Brother.
brother. Adelphos is brother. And Philadelphia is the city of
Brotherly love.
brotherly love. That's what it means in Greek. Phileo is the word, or philios, which is a noun, means love. But it's a kind of love that brothers feel for one another.
Mm-hmm.
It's the kind of love that husbands and wives feel towards one another. It's the kind of love friends feel towards one another. It is an emotional love. Phileo is an emotional love.
Opposed to,
Okay, as opposed to another word, which is agapeo. Agapeo or agape is the noun. Agapeo also means love, is a verb. And it's the word that Paul uses in the 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians, where he talks about love, the love chapter. He says, love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious, boastful, arrogant, or rude. Love does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It doesn't rejoice in wrongdoing. It rejoices in the truth. It believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. I've lost one now. When he says love isn't envious or rude, is that an emotion? When he's defining love here, is that emotion?
it's emotion. You feel it.
Do I?
Yes, you do.
Do I feel what?
Love.
What am I feeling? Okay, now you're using more. Right, I agree with you. You feel filial.
Yeah.
When you feel love, it's filial. If I say love is patient and kind,
Yeah. That's a different.
how is that love different? Is it an emotion?
It's a choice.
It's a choice.
Yeah.
If I and I do, I like all of them, but I like all of them. I really do like all of you, which is a good thing. But did I choose to like you?
Yes.
No, it just happened, right? Because it's an emotion, right?
Yeah.
It just happened. I like you.
Right.
Are there people that I don't like?
Yeah.
Duh. There are people that I don't like.
Yeah.
Did I choose not to like them?
I guess so.
The action.
Maybe not. They just have a personality that I don't enjoy.
Well, then that's.
Or they're obnoxious. Now, I just don't like it, right? I can't help it. It just is. Now, that's filial love.
You can help
It's an emotional. Can I help feeling the emotion? I can turn emotion on and off.
Yes.
Can you turn emotion on and off?
I
If you're a
can.
Vulcan, yeah.
Huh?
Yes.
If you're a Vulcan, you can. If you're mad, can you say, I'm choosing not to be mad?
Yes.
Heck no! I'm going to be mad. What can I choose to do? What, now I can't choose whether or not to be mad. What can I, where can I actually choose?
Not sure.
I can, okay, what I'm gonna do about it, right?
Right.
I can choose what I do about it. If you make me really mad, I'm gonna feel it. Now I've got a choice, right?
Yeah.
I can either do what?
Outrage yourself.
I can either show it or not. I can either say something sarcastic at you or not do it. Now I've got control, right?
Yeah.
But the feeling,
Is deep down
You only have
inside.
control of yourself.
right, that's what I'm saying. I have control over how I respond to the feeling I'm having.
Correct.
That's right. And this is the difference between phileo and agape, or agapeo.
You're recording this one.
This is the choice I've got. I can choose to be patient. I can choose to be kind. I can choose not to be envious or arrogant or rude. I can choose that. I can't choose whether I like you or not, but I can choose whether I'm going to treat you in a
Different way.
loving way. And that's the difference between agapeo and phileo. Because phileo is an emotion, agapeo is a decision. And what is fascinating in this passage, and this is the way I've translated it, because when you see love, you start thinking, why the heck is he doing it 3 times?
The threes.
There
in
are
a
different
reason.
words used. Because when he says to Peter the first time, Simon Peter, do you love me? He's using the word
Love.
agapeo.
Yeah.
In other words, he's asking Peter,
To love him.
have you made a decision to love me? Have you made a decision to love? And Peter's response is,
Yes.
yes, Lord, I
Love you.
phileo.
Oh, I can't say it.
In other words, that's why I translated the way I did.
Yeah.
Peter's response is, I really like you. I really do. I feel emotional towards you. But he's not answering the question.
Yeah.
Because Jesus is asking, have you made the decision to love? Which means
Maybe.
treating me and others in a loving way. And Peter says, emotionally, I am with you, Lord. I
Maybe.
really like you.
Maybe Jesus didn't feel it.
Well, I think Jesus felt it.
That's why he kept asking.
Peter hadn't made the decision to do it yet.
I think.
And that's why Jesus says, what's the first thing he says? Feed my lamb. Now, how do you feed lambs? What is a lamb?
It might be
It's a baby
people.
sheep, right?
Yeah.
Feeding lambs is,
Or people.
God's work.
It's probably nice.
it may be nice. Is it easy? Getting lambs to eat, to feed lambs?
Oh, you
That
can
may be a little tricky,
I'm
right?
hungry enough.
All right? But it's a little tricky feeding lambs. I mean, it's not easy, but it's something you can do. Ask the second time, do you love me? Agapeo. Peter says,
He was good.
You know
you
I do.
know I like you.
So you won't say
The
the
sarcastic way.
Phileo. He won't answer in other words, John is shaping this, not to just convey a conversation that he's written down. Oh, isn't that interesting? Oh, what's he going to say next? Let me write it down. You know, this is John telling us about commissioning, about what we're called to do. If we've made the decision to love, Lord have mercy, we need to be out there feeding
The sheep.
lambs,
Yeah.
doing the hard work, the little babies, little baby Christians.
With the ball.
We're out there to feed, right?
Goat's getting milk or something.
Yeah, we gotta watch what we're giving them. We gotta be gentle with them. Lord have mercy, that's a hard job. Ask Peter again, do you love me? Peter says, I'm not going to answer that question. You know I like you. And Jesus says, well, if you love me, agapeo, then what's the second one? 10 sheep. What does tending sheep mean? Watching over them, does it include feeding?
Yeah.
Sheep? You better believe
To
it.
protect
You're
them.
tending sheep, you're feeding them, but what else are you doing?
You're protecting
You're watching them, you're what? You're protecting them?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're making sure that they are
Okay,
safe and growing up, right?
Right.
All right. The third time he asked Peter, but now Jesus changes. And instead of saying, do you love me, agapeo, he says, Peter, do you like me? He changes the word. And Peter gets all bent out of shape and says, you know I like you. I've been saying I like you. And then Jesus says to him, feed the sheep. And if you look at feeding lambs, tending sheep, and feeding sheep, which is the easiest? Feeding sheep. Feeding sheep is the easiest. And see, I think, so what do you think John is doing in this conversation? What is he telling the church later? What is he telling his people?
That it
Telling
isn't going to
us?
be easy to do what we have to do.
What's that?
That it isn't going to be easy to do what we
Okay,
have to do, but we've got to do it.
If we have made the decision to love Jesus,
Yeah.
and remember, Jesus says, if you love me, you'll love
Everybody.
one another. Okay, so if you made the decision to love me, you're going to be loving others. And he uses the word agapeo, okay, here. If you made the decision to love, you're going to be loving other people. If you make the decision to love, you're going to have a tough job. You're going to have to be feeding those little baby Christians, who are just learning and have a lot of questions and a lot of complaints and, we don't do things right, and you got to do that. And if you really love me, you're going to have to protect those people who already believe. You got to take care of them. You got to not only feed them, you got to protect them. You got to care for them. You got to keep them in their pen. You got to lead them out into pastures and stuff. You got a full-time job. But you know what? Even if you never get to the place where you've made the decision to love me, and your faith never gets beyond just feeling emotional about me, just liking me. You've never made the decision to love. You just are emotional. There's still something you can do.
Still something what?
There's still something you can do. And what can you do?
love them.
You can do the easiest job of all,
Believe in them.
but you can still do it.
Believe in them.
Yeah, and wow, to me, that is a powerful lesson.
What?
That even if you haven't made the decision that I am going to be patient and kind, that I'm going to be patient and kind to everybody, even if I'm not at that point. And the only thing I can do is, well, I like these people, I don't like them, so I want to hang out with these guys. See, the guys I don't like, I can still do what?
Hang out with them.
I can still be patient. I can be kind. I can be, not envious, arrogant, or rude. I can do that even if I don't like them. I can do that. Easier if I do.
Just get along.
But I can still do that. But I can't emotionally like them. I may do it. I won't like doing it.
Just get along with
But
them.
I can do it. But even if all I'm going to do is hang out with the people that I emotionally like, you know what? You still have a job to do. And your job is the easiest of all the jobs. But you know what? Sheep still need to be fed.
Yeah. That's it.
Sheep still need to be fed. And you know what? You can do it. And to me, that becomes one of those, wow!
How do you judge when you meet a sheep person? How do you treat them?
I'll tell you, Art, I really try to treat people with the kind of love. I try to be agapeo. I try to be gentle and kind to the people I meet, whether I like them or not. Now, do I always do that? Heck no. I was in a bad mood today. Art, I'm telling you, I was in a bad mood today. And I wasn't always gentle and kind today.
Oh,
And that's not a plus for me. That's not a mark on the good side. I don't know that I was generally kind.
Better get to confession.
Yeah, I think I got kind of sarcastic. I got kind of sarcastic and aggressive a couple of times today that I wish I had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because of my slinger.
Every time I read this section,
Uh,
I think of one man,
what's that?
Rob Starr.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rob Starr.
Yeah.
Oh, he was a great guy.
He was.
You're in
Yes, he
town.
was.
Starr
He
was
was
a
an
man.
amazing-
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay.
Wrong.
That guy, you ain't think about him?
Oh, absolutely.
He came here, his family had always gone to church here, and they moved to Florida, and then Rob came back and he was in the church and everything, and he came to our Sunday school class. Now, not because I taught it, but we had a great group of guys there. Dan, Grant, John, Jezerski, about 80. And it was just like he found a place home. So most of us were on session. And Rob says, how you get on session? Let somebody know that you're interested. I'll put you up for nomination. And you gotta understand, that's only a nomination. That's not a guarantee that you're going to get on.
Okay.
But he became more and more involved in all the activities of the church. This guy eventually became so involved, I forget which part of the Bible was that we were studying and working on, that he became so involved that he enrolled
Oh, yeah.
in Oxford, England, Oxford School Seminary, to learn about what we were studying.
Wow.
And then he became
Rob
on
was
the
special.
board of the
Pittsburgh Seminary.
Pittsburgh Seminary.
He was a commissioner to General Assembly. He was moderator of Presbytery. And Rob was, I'll tell you,
You didn't like it.
Rob, Rob was my best friend.
I'm just kidding.
Rob was a really good salesman.
Yeah.
He was really successful salesman.
Yeah, that's coming here at 5:30 in the morning on Saturdays.
He would, and I went with him. And this was Rob. When he was Commissioner of General Assembly, he wanted me to come with him to interpret what was happening. So he paid me to go with him, just to be an advisor. Okay.
Days later.
I certainly will. Anyway, he was, but he was a movie company, Stark Van Lines movie company.
Yeah.
When we were at the place where they have displays, kind of a marketplace. If you've ever been to a conference, they always have rooms where, different vendors or organizations promote that stuff. Yeah, kind of like that. And they have that at General Assembly. And he would go up to some of the people. They had a guy that had Amish furniture, I remember. Had Amish furniture. And I remember Rob going up to him and talking. And they were just having a real pleasant, conversation. And at the end, and I was going through looking at books and stuff. And the guy, when they were sort of breaking apart, the guy said, "Well, you got a card, don't you?" And Rob said, "Yeah, of course I've got a card." And gave him his card. And he said, "Okay, I'll be giving you a call." And he was selling, his van line to this Amish furniture. But everything he did was so gentle. Now I'm sure he got angry at times, but he was just an incredibly gentle guy. And it just always amazed me, not only how he loved to soak in information. I mean, you couldn't teach him enough.
That was a question, and none of us could. He's going to find it one way or the other if he want to go to England. Now, I think that wasn't like for 2 days or anything. It was a whole semester in college.
Yeah.
And he's a college graduate.
Yeah, he went to seminary, took classes in seminary to learn Greek. Really because he wanted to know Greek, because he could read the Bible better in Greek. And I remember Rob and I would meet a lot, and I said, "Rob, you understand, you're going to pass me. There's going to be a time you're going to pass me, you're going to know more than I know
But you do.
about this."
He lived up in Sewickley.
Yeah.
Okay, and there was this, I forget what the class was, or what it was called now,
Oh, I still get notices.
And Rob promoted it to us, you know, and he says, there were about 8 of us in there.
Yeah.
Saturday mornings at 5:30, I'd get up and come down here.
It was an ungodly time.
And I imagine him
He was very busy.
getting up, the time he would have to get up and swiftly to drive down here, he'd be the first one down here.
Yep.
Rob was quite a guy, but that's what he did. He was loving and kind. He had that agapeo love that Paul talks about. And not just the emotion. It wasn't that he was one way to people he liked and was something else to others. You know, he was just gentle and kind to everybody. And that's what Jesus is talking about here. This is exactly what Jesus is
I like you, I love you.
Yeah, but it's the love I want is I don't care if you like me, just treat people in a loving way. You don't have to like them, just treat them in a loving way. And that's what he's challenging them to do. And that is really, really exciting, at least it is for me.
This
Now,
really lifted me.
now what else does he do? Once he has this conversation like verse 18, where does he go from there? What does Jesus say to Peter? Again, he's talking to Peter.
Oh,
Stretch out your hands.
When you were younger,
Oh, about the belt.
yeah,
Good.
but when you are old, and someone else will fasten the belt. And John does this a lot. He has a lot of things in parentheses, explains what it means. And what does it mean when he talks about this stretching out your hand and someone else will fasten the belt around you? John says,
Teach them
he says,
and they'll
boy,
go."
that's really confusing. Let me tell you what it means. And what does it mean?
Teach them and they'll
Well-
they'll finish your,
That
Your
could be,
mission more
but
or
John tells us what he
Be
means.
careful of what you're being friendly.
Well, again, that would be a good application if John hadn't given us verse 19.
Yeah.
And what does he say in verse 19?
That he said it to indicate the kind.
This is I'm describing the way you're going to die. So this little statement has to do with how you're going to die. In other words, now you read that through that lens. You're going to hit a point right now, you're in control, right? You're putting on your own belt, but the time's going to come when somebody else is going to do it. And you're going to lose control. And you're going to die.
Gonna die.
They're going to kill you. They're going to kill you. Which, again, is not a shocker because earlier, what did Jesus say about the good shepherd? What's the difference between the good shepherd and the hired man? There's one difference. You hire a person to keep track of your flock, he'll feed them, he'll take them out to the pastures, he'll give them water. What is the definitive difference between hiring somebody to take care of a flock and it being your flock? What's the difference?
Risk your life to
You will
take care of your own
lay
flock.
down, you will risk yourself to defend your flock. Or at least that's what Jesus says. Whether you would or not, I don't want to get into that. But that's what Jesus says. That's the big difference. And what he's telling Peter is what?
Don't hire somebody, do it yourself.
That's what you're going to end up that's going to happen to you. You're going to hit a point, you don't know it now, where you're going to have to lay down your life for your sheep.
Do what?
to protect
For your
them.
flock. You're going to be laying down your life for your flock. You don't realize it now because things are good. But the time's going to come. And again, this is to a church that some people in the church may be thinking, if God is so great, why did the apostles die such horrible deaths? And they can point to this and say, look, Jesus said, this is exactly what's going to happen to them. Exactly. How does John close this? How does he conclude this?
Says follow me.
Okay. Peter in verse 20, yes, gave a command, right? After this gave a command, follow me,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
What happens in verse 20?
Else mentioned again.
Yeah, that's right. Turn and saw, and Jesus just says, follow me. And guess what? the disciple whom Jesus loved, what is he doing?
He's
right.
He's following! Da, 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 da. Who is the hero of this piece? He is! Woo, woo, woo. He's doing exactly what Jesus told him to do. And
So in other words, it means don't try to be the ruler like Patton in the army. Be with your men.
in a real sense, and you know something? There may come a time when you're going to have to risk yourself for them.
Yeah.
You're going to have to put them first.
Defend
And you know
religion.
what? That's the difference between phileo and agapeo.
That's it.
That's the difference. You don't do that just because you like them. You do it because you've made the decision to love them.
And we should love all men.
And that's the goal.
Yeah.
That becomes the goal. And we can do it. I mean, this is not, you think of all these things that are impossible to do. I think it's impossible to like everybody. I don't think it's impossible to love everybody.
Yep.
We can love, we can choose to be kind to the people around us. We can choose that.
Like you were today.
I wasn't. And I was kind to some, but I wasn't kind to everybody.
I'm glad I didn't call today.
I was maybe because I was overly kind earlier. I was less than kind later. And it was directed at somebody I didn't like. So, it was directed at somebody I just didn't like. I wasn't very nice to.
But you love them.
I should have loved them. I didn't.
That was your choice.
They're not calling anymore because they probably got the message.
They probably got the message that I didn't like. And it's nobody you even know. I mean, it's not even anybody here. So it's not like the guy that
We're talking about me.
Dale called me and I just let him have it. Linda Kornecki, you called me and boy, oh boy. All right. Well, how does he end this? Because he does something that is kind of, first he closes it in verse 25.
Yeah.
But to get between verse 20 and verse 25, you got this odd little thing.
Yeah.
Peter in his place.
Yeah, he kind of puts Peter, which tells me
There's
that
the Last
Peter
Supper.
is not the hero of John's community.
He's not.
He is not the one that they look to for guidance.
Yeah.
It's this disciple whom Jesus loved.
It looks like the Last Supper.
Yeah, what does he say about that disciple?
Lord, who is that is going to betray you?
Evidently, there was a rumor
Yeah.
that Jesus was coming back before this guy died.
Oh, yeah.
There was a rumor. And you know what? I got a gut feeling that this guy died. And it's caused real disruption in the church. That the church, this is an old man who knew Jesus, and he had lived and lived and lived, and I think the people in the church assumed that Jesus was, when Jesus was going to come back, everybody else was dead, Jesus was going to come back before he died. And that's what they've been putting their hope in, and all of a sudden, he dies. Now what does the church do?
Close.
Wow, yeah, closed.
Really?
Yeah, closed, because evidently we must be wrong. And that's kind of what he's saying. You're not wrong. It's all in the hands of God anyway. So you don't worry about it. And what's the last verse? How does he end? Because he ends it again, just like he ended chapter 20, right?
There aren't enough words to write it all down.
There are so many other things I could have written, but
You need another book.
that's right, I did. But what I wrote was true and enough. What I wrote was enough. You don't need any more. And that's the way the Gospel of John ends. What I find interesting is I think if you read the letter of John, first letter of John, not the second and third. But if you read the first letter of John, I think the first letter of John is a commentary on the Gospel of John, because I think people read the Gospel of John and got some wrong ideas. And John had to step in and say, I think they're misinterpreting stuff. And so let me get you back on track. But this is how he ends. And so the appearances are done in John.
Do you think that that's true at the end of that, in that 24, that many things were written, that Jesus said that we couldn't even get him into the books?
Oh, I think, what is he saying? By saying that, what is he suggesting?
I think he just didn't have all the information.
That Jesus is so incredible. His life was so magnificent. You couldn't even write it all. It would be humanly impossible to write it all. But you know what? What's written here is enough. If you read this, you got enough to believe. You got enough.
Yeah, I don't know how old you are, but.
Old.
This goes through my mind.
Oh,
Any one of us.
But me.
If everybody that we've come in contact with or knew had to write something about us, I guarantee it would take a lot more, even though we don't think maybe sometimes so much of ourselves or that we were important or anything. But if they had to write everything that they knew about us, it'd be quite long.
It'd be a long story. It'd be a long story. Yeah.
I don't know, because I forget, like,
I had to do that long and I'd write 4 or 5 chapters. Just how to go through your bullet score. Would be all kinds of stuff on that. Yeah, chapter 23. Jim Beam, Jack Daniels.
When I was
If you meet somebody in the store and that person had to write down every word they knew about, okay? And then the next.
I can't do that, that's right, it's bragging, I
Yeah.
can't do that.
You know,
So I
I'm not
said,
saying
here's my
it
scrapbook.
would fill a library,
Well,
it'd be
they
a
took
lot
my
more than you'd ever
scrapbook, and
expect.
they wrote
or
a whole bunch of
even
them,
know
they
that
were
you
amazed
can-
at some of the stuff, and they wrote this whole bunch, and I'm sitting here, and I'm getting more embarrassed, and more embarrassed, and finally I said, wow, I did all that? So to have somebody write something down,
Oh, absolutely.
it's very difficult.
Next week, we're going to finish this up by looking at the first chapter of Acts. The first chapter of Acts. And then what we're going to do after that is we're going to go back, and I'm looking at Sandy because you were one of the suggestions. We're going to be looking at some people.
Oh, good.
And we're going to start right at the beginning. We're going to look at some of the characters in Genesis.
I do better with faces
Oh,
than
my
names.
Yeah, we're going to be looking at some of the characters, the main characters in Genesis. So we can get to know them a little bit better. Okay?
Hey, I'll have to, those are gonna be here Thursday.
What time?
was our,
Oh, that, oh, we're gonna do that?